Hey there, my name's Ben McEwen for aetutes.com. Today we're going to be creating what I call a light swirl. Let's take a look. So this effect may seem pretty familiar, because some people have created it with a still camera and waving a couple of lights around everywhere, kinda like creating a stop frame animation. But in my opinion, in After Effects we get a much smoother and much nicer looking result. So let's jump into After Effects and get started. First of all, we need to get our footage inside of After Effects to start working. To do this, we go File, Import, File. I've already got my file in here, so we'll continue to the next step. Click and drag our footage onto the Make New Composition button. So you can see here our footage is automatically placed inside a new composition with the same settings, same frames per second, same everything. Big time saver. Next, we'll create a new solid. To do this, go Layer, New, Solid. Or you can use our shortcut, Control Y. Now it doesn't really matter what color we use. I'm just using Magneto, and click Make Comp Size and OK. Now for the actual streak of light, I'm using a particle generator called Trapcode Particular, and in my opinion it is the best particle plugin you can get for After Effects. If you don't have it, you can get a trial from www.trapcode.com, or you can buy the full plugin. So we'll type in here Particular, here we go, and click and drag it onto our Magneto solid. Now before we go any further, I'm going to name our layers. So we'll click on them, hit enter, and we'll type in footage for this one, and particles for this one. It's pretty important to keep your project files really organized. It just helps you later on down the track when you have multiple layers and you've got no idea what they are. So when we scrub through the timeline, you can see our particles are kind of spewing out of this point in the center. So we need to make this point follow our finger. So to do this, we're going to go Layer, New, Null Object. And we'll drag this over to our finger. OK. Now make sure this is selected and hit P to reveal our position properties. And we'll click on our particles, toggle down our emitter controls, hold Alt and click Position XY. And I'll drag this up to give us a little bit more room. So click in here, delete that, click on our pick whip and hold it, and drag it up to the word position on our null object. And release, and just click out. So essentially what this is doing is getting the position XY, so pretty much the position of our null object, on our particles, and linking it to the position of our null object. Now I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but in the long run it makes our work much easier, since we're going to be linking quite a few things to our null object here. So we'll click on the stopwatch for position on our null object, which will create a keyframe and start us off animating. So I'll zoom in a little bit, hit page down, reposition. We're trying to position this little point here, the top left corner of our null object, on our finger. Just dragging around, pressing page down for next frame, and clicking and dragging. And we want to do this for the whole project, the whole clip should I say. So if we keep clicking and dragging, we can turn the visibility for our particles off if it gets in the way, and we just want to do this, like I said before, for the whole clip. Okay, so you can see our null object is sticking to my finger here pretty well. If we turn on our particles, now you can see it's kind of spraying around and going crazy. I mean, this might be what you want, but for this tutorial, it's not. So let's go ahead and fix that. We'll set our particles per second to 2000, which you can see it's created a lot more particles, and it might slow down your system a little bit. We'll keep scrolling down, set our velocity to 0, our velocity random to 0, and our velocity from motion to 5. So pretty much this means everything's not going to go crazy, but we still maintain a little bit of motion, and it keep some life in our particles here. So we'll keep scrolling down, set the life to 1 second. Keep going down, sphere feather, we'll keep it 50. Size we'll set to 1 also. Keep going down, and we want to lower our opacity just enough to keep it solid, but so we can see through the tiniest bit. So about 65 looks good to me. So now if we scrub through from the start, we can see it's looking pretty cool. Now, except one problem. When it goes behind, we still have our particles on top. That's a problem. So how are we going to fix it? I'll show you now. Go Layer, New, Solid. We'll choose a different color this time. Let's say orange. Click OK, click Make Comp Size, and hit OK again. Now again, we'll name these Matte and Finger Track. Now drag our matte just above the particles, turn the visibility off, click our pen tool, and we just want to draw around the arm here, just like this. Okay, and we'll toggle down the arrow and get to our mask properties, and if we set the visibility on for our matte, we can see we've got a big orange color over here, which isn't what we want, but we need it to kind of visualize our blur along the edge here. So we need to unlink our mask feather, and on our x-axis only, just drag it up a little bit. So you can see it softens out the edge and makes it blend in much more. That's pretty good. Second thing, we need to click the stopwatch next to mask path. So that's set to keyframe here, and we're ready to animate. So we can turn off the visibility for the matte, and once again using page up and page down, just track here, whoops, and make sure we're covering up only this part of the line. So I'll go through this and pause the recording. Okay, so now I've rotoscoped my body and made sure to cover up the parts of the particles that are covering my arms. But now we need to translate this data to tell our particles layer not to display when it kind of intersects this area. To do this, we're going to set track matte to alpha inverted matte. If you can't see this setting, hit toggle switches on modes down here, or you can just hit F4. Now I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain what it's actually doing, because a lot of people don't actually know what they do and therefore don't really understand it and can't use it to its full potential. So what I'm going to do is just switch off all the visibility, turn on the visibility for our matte, and hit Alt 4. So now we're viewing the alpha channel of our matte layer. So what an alpha channel is an image based of just black, whites and grey pixels. So you can see we've got the black here, the white and the greys in between where the feathering occurs, just to make sure the light swirl blends in. So what this means is everything that's black is completely transparent, everything that's white is completely opaque, and all the greys and in-betweens are kind of the semi-transparent parts. Now what our track matte down here is doing is taking the alpha matte, which is this, and since it's inverted, it's flipping the blacks and the whites. So if I demonstrate this, put an invert on here and set it to alpha. So pretty much it's just doing this. So everything that's white is visible and everything that's black you can't see at all. So if I take this invert back off, hit Alt 4 to go back to our RGB and turn this off and turn these two back on. So you can see, if you can imagine our matte again, all the white areas here are visible, and in here was our little black box, and that's the parts that are invisible. Now that was a pretty darn quick explanation, and I'm sure it's going to be pretty confusing to some of you, so I'd advise you go onto Google and have a look for it, because it's pretty useful information. Anyway, back to the tutorial. Next step is to make this streak here glow. So to do this, I'm going to duplicate our finger track, just in case we need it again later on. Now I'm going to click the first finger track, hold down Shift, and select our particles. And go Control, Shift, C, or Layer, Pre-Compose. And make sure Move All Attributes into the new composition is selected. And check Open New Composition. And let's call this Light Swirl underscore pre-comp. And hit OK. If I turn this back, so you can see that's the transparency. So now really all we've got is our streak just going around. That's where I am. We can see it's obscured. Okay, so let's make this glow. Make a new black solid, layer, new solid, and it's essential that this one's black. Click Make Comp Size, OK, and drag it to the bottom of the stack. Next, we'll go Layer, New, Adjustment Layer, and let's find our Fast Blur effect, and take it to about 5, and click Repeat Edge Pixels. And we'll set our mode to Add. Now we'll click off, click on again, and hit Control D, Control D, Control D to duplicate them 3 times. Now I'll click on our first duplicate, set the blurriness to 20. The next one, set it to 40. The next one, set it to 200. Now this might not be the look you're going for. It looks a little bit blown out to me. So you can play around with the transfer modes. Some work better with add, some work better with screen. It's just kind of a softer effect. I like that one a bit better, and so I'll be using that. So if we go back to our first composition, we need to set our transfer mode of our light swirl we just created to either screen or add. For this one, I'm going to keep it at add because, as you can see, the light in the scene is sort of interactive with this composition. Set or hit T and bring down the opacity a bit, just so it's not so bright. See, that looks much nicer. I'm going to add a color balance on top. Check the preserve luminosity, and we'll make this one red. Nice and red here. Except something essential that lots of people generally forget is we need to make this swirl blend in with the colors in the whole scene. So I'm going to go tint, which will set up black and white, and I'll just lower the amount to 10. And I'm looking for a happy medium of red that blends into the scene properly. And I'm liking the look of that. It's looking pretty cool. So something else that I did to our actual streak was add a little bit of noise to it. So if we go back into our pre-comp, click on particles, I'll just minimize that, and type in Turbulent Displace and drag it in the scene. Now I'll just turn off our glow layers to make things simple, and I'll make the size go down a little bit, liking that. Maybe turn the amount down to about 30. So you can see there's a bit of rippling, and it just makes for a little bit of distortion, and it helps sell it. So let's turn our glows back on, go back into our footage, and now let's create the light that actually sort of follows where the light swirl is moving to. To do this, we'll go Layer, New, Light, set our color to pale red, OK, make sure this is set to point, and OK, and OK. And now we need to position our light in exactly the same spot as here, and we'll parent it to our finger track. So now it doesn't look like it's doing much, but that's because whatever the light affects has to be a 3D layer. So if we hit the toggle switches and modes button and click the checkbox for the 3D, now you can see everything's saturated pretty red. If you move the light back or forward in Z space, we can see the light kind of minimizes or maximizes. So you want to get kind of say around about there. So we've got a vignette look kind of happening here. And now as we scroll along, it's not going to link perfectly since our particle Z depth can't really be controlled the same way. But the result looks pretty nice as it is. I'm just going to click on the light, go Control-Shift-Y to bring up our options, and just sort of tone back the red. It's a little bit too much. Yeah, that's much nicer. So the last thing I did to mine to kind of sell it was the little ball of light where the particles are kind of coming from and the streak starts. So we'll go back into our pre-comp, and once again we'll turn off our glows just to speed things up a bit. We'll go Layer, New, Solid, and make this one white. Hit OK. So we'll turn the visibility of this off, click on the rectangle and hold, and we'll go down to the Ellipse Tool. So what this is going to let us do is create a circular mask really easily. So we need to get on to the pretty much the last few pixels here of the start of the light swirl, and just start clicking and dragging. And if you hold down Alt Control Shift, you can see it kind of uniformly scales up and down. You want to make it pretty small, probably about that, and we'll turn the visibility back on. So if we click on our white solid, hit F, and it'll feather it out a bunch. Now, I'm thinking that that's probably a little bit too big. So we'll click on our white solid, hit MM, again, there we go, and bring down our mask expansion, just so it kind of gets in there a little bit. So you can see it's pretty subtle there. So we're going to duplicate it, hit F, bring the feather down to about 5, toggle the mask back down, and bring the expansion in even more. So maybe -2. Feather to 2. Okay. Toggle them down, make some more space. We'll click our first white solid, hold Control, select the second white solid, and hit Motion Blur here. Hit F4 and select the Motion Blur checkboxes there. So the last thing to do is we'll set our transfer modes from normal to add. Okay, so now we need to get this little spot here to follow the start of our track. So if we select both of these and parent them to our finger track, you can see that's doing that pretty nicely. Now we'll turn our glows back on, and what we need to do is kind of obscure this little ball thing as well. So I'm going to select the matte, Control D to duplicate it twice, drag one to the very top, and one in between our two white solids. Now if we click on both the white solids by clicking on one, holding Control and clicking on the next, we'll set the track matte to alpha inverted. So if we go back into our main comp and watch it kind of fly around, it's going behind. So now you see not only does the light streak get obscured, but that little ball of light does as well. So that's pretty much all there is to it. There's a lot of different customization options you can do to this. For example, you could make the background blur out, you could make it change color as it's flying around, you could add more or less distortion. Yeah, it's really, really open-ended effect. Anyway, I hope you learned a bunch from this tutorial, not only how to make a light streak, but a couple of other things about the program. Just leave a comment below and tell me what you think. Once again, my name is Ben McEwen for aetutes.com, and thanks a lot.